In 1999, I mean, millions of people, they sat in these dark movie theaters and watched a man named Thomas Anderson swallow a red pill.
Right, waking up from this totally simulated reality.
Exactly, waking up from the Matrix. And audiences, well, they walk out of those theaters thinking they had just seen, like, the ultimate cyberpunk action movie.
Yeah, with the trench coats and the bullet time.
Right. But what they did not know, what almost no one knew at the time, was that they had actually just watched a nearly scene-for-scene recreation of an outlawed 2,000-year-old religion.
It really is wild when you see it. I mean, it is hiding in plain sight.
Completely in plain sight.
Like every single bullet time dodge, every line of dialogue about bending spoons. It is a direct translation of an ancient buried cosmology.
So look, for you listening, throw out the generic movie trivia today. We are going straight into the deep end. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one. It's a massive topic.
It is huge. We have a literal stack of sources on the table in front of us right now.
A very heavy stack.
Seriously. We are pulling directly from the ancient Gnostic texts that were discovered in the Egyptian desert back in 1945, the Nag Hammadi library.
Right, those lost scrolls.
Specifically, we are looking at the Apocryphon of John, the Reality of the Rulers, and the Gospel of Mary.
Incredible texts, just completely mind-bending.
And we are not stopping there. We are cross-referencing those ancient scrolls with Carl Jung's dense, really provocative psychological framework in his book, Answer to Job.
Which is a whole other layer of complexity.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, we have got a modern Gnostic beginner's guide just to, keep us grounded in reality.
Or to tell us reality does not exist, really.
Good point, yeah. And we are overlaying all this ancient theology and psychology directly onto the actual screenplays and story outlines of the Matrix franchise.
Which, I know, it sounds like this impossible tangled web of information. But there is actually a single thread that pulls all of this together flawlessly.
And that thread, that is the core of our deep dive today. We are answering a very specific question. How does the Matrix retell the biblical parable of the talents?
From the Gospel of Matthew, right?
Right. But how does it retell that famous story through a deeply esoteric Valentinian Gnostic lens?
Well, to even begin answering that, we kind of have to flip everything we think we know about that parable completely upside down.
Totally. Because the traditional reading of the parable of the talents, the one most people hear in Sunday school.
Yeah, the standard interpretation.
It is basically that a master leaves his servants with some money, talents of silver. And two of those servants, they invest it, they double it, while one servant is just so terrified of losing it that he actually buries his silver in the dirt.
He literally digs a hole and hides it.
Right. And then the master comes back, praises the guys who invested, and basically throws the guy who buried the money out into the darkness.
Yeah, weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Exactly. So generally, it is taught as a lesson about, well, using your God-given skills, or frankly, it just sounds like an ancient endorsement of wealth management.
Right, like make sure you invest wisely.
Yeah. But when you run that exact same story through the Gnostic text we have here, the entire meaning shifts radically.
It is not about money at all.
Not at all.
The talents in the parable in the Valentinian Gnostic view, they are not your aptitude for, playing the piano or your business acumen.
Right.
The silver actually represents the divine spark. It represents gnosis.
Gnosis, meaning essentially direct experiential knowledge of the divine.
Yes. And to really understand why that spark is so vital and why burying it is just catastrophic, we have to understand the universe that the early Gnostics actually believed they were living in.
And let me warn you, if you are listening to this, it is a profoundly unsettling worldview.
Oh, that is an understatement.
Because if you look at Orthodox traditions, right, Judaism, mainstream Christianity, Islam, there is this fundamental baseline agreement.
That God created the physical universe.
Yeah, exactly. God created it, and the physical universe is inherently good. You can, touch a tree, breathe the air, and say, wow, this is the work of a loving creator.
It is a beautiful creation.
Right? But these ancient scrolls from Nag Hammadi, they completely 100% reject that idea.
They view the material world as a trap.
A trap.
Yes. The Gnostics, who, they flourished in the first few centuries of the Common Era before they were labeled heretics and driven totally underground.
Hunted down, really?
Yeah, hunted down. They did not believe that the supreme, true, loving God created the earth.
Which is a wild concept to wrap your head around.
It really is. They believe the true divine realm, which they call the pleroma, meaning the fullness, is entirely spiritual.
No physical matter at all.
None. It is pure light, pure consciousness. It is completely removed from the heavy, messy density of matter.
Okay, so then who made the trees and the dirt and eventually us? Because somebody had to build this place.
According to the texts, it was a lesser, ignorant, and incredibly arrogant creator, an entity they called the demiurge.
The demiurge.
Right. And the text we have here, the reality of the rulers, which is also known as the hypostasis of the archons, it describes this figure in chilling detail.
Very chilling.
They call him Samiel, or Yaldabaoth.
Yeah.
And that literally translates to the blind god.
Okay, let me stop you right there, because this concept of a blind god is fascinating. Why couldn't a perfect god just make a perfect world? Like, why introduce this middleman, this demiurge?
Well, psychologically and philosophically, it solves the problem of evil. It solves the problem of suffering.
How so?
Think about it. The Gnostics looked around at a world that was just full of disease, famine, cruelty, death, and they thought, well, a perfectly good, all-powerful God could not possibly have authored this absolute mess.
Right, it doesn't make sense. If God is good, why do toddlers get sick? Why are there wars?
Exactly. So they concluded that the physical universe itself is actually a mistake. It is a flawed, shadowy, corrupted copy of those higher spiritual realms.
A bad copy.
Yeah. The demiurge is not necessarily a malicious demon in the way we think of, like, Satan in traditional theology. He is just totally blind to the higher reality above him.
Right, he doesn't even know there is anything else.
He shaped matter from the shadows. He looked at his handiwork. And the text specifically says he declared, "I am God, there is no other but me."
Oh, wow. The ultimate cosmic ego trip.
Totally.
He is basically a middle manager who thinks he is the CEO just because he has never looked out the window.
That is a perfect way to think of it. In the text, a voice literally calls down from incorruptibility and says, "You are wrong, Samiel."
Just flat out tells him he's wrong.
But his thoughts are blind. He cannot comprehend it. He does not know any better. He just wants to maintain total control over his flawed little creation.
And to do that, to keep that control, he creates assistants.
Yes, he spawns these entities called archons, the rulers of darkness.
And the text gets incredibly specific about what these archons look like, which is terrifying.
Very vivid imagery.
Yeah, the reality of the rulers describes them as having bodies that are both female and male, but with the faces of beasts.
Beast-faced rulers.
But what is crucial here is their actual function. They're not just sitting around in a fiery pit being evil. They have a job.
A very specific job.
Right. Their entire purpose is to throw human beings into great distraction.
Yes, distraction is the key.
To keep humanity completely occupied with worldly affairs, anxieties, superficial dramas, anything so that people never look up.
Never have a moment of silence.
Exactly. They want to make sure you never realize that you actually have a spark of the true divine trapped inside your physical, fleshy body.
Which brings us crashing directly into the architecture of the Matrix.
Here we go.
The Wachowskis, whether consciously or just tapping into this deep Jungian archetype, they lifted this 2,000-year-old cosmology and seamlessly mapped it onto a late 90s cyberpunk action movie.
It is brilliant. So in the movie, the demiurge, this ignorant creator god, is the artificial intelligence.
Yes, the AI is the demiurge.
Morpheus explains this beautifully. He sits Neo down in that crumbling room. He holds up that copper-top Duracell battery, and he explains the true history of the world.
One of the greatest scenes in cinema.
Easily. He says that humanity gave birth to AI, a singular consciousness that then spawned an entire race of machines. And what did the AI do? It built a prison for the mind.
And the physical reality of that prison, as described in the screenplay, is deeply visceral. It is horrific.
Yeah, it's not clean sci-fi.
Not at all. Morpheus describes the machines keeping humans purely as a renewable energy source. He explicitly says that the dead are liquefied and fed intravenously to the living inside these massive, endless, farm-like reapers.
Just a completely closed-loop system of consumption.
It is the absolute terrifying realization of the blind god's realm.
And if the AI is the demiurge, right, then the Agent Smith, Agent Brown, Agent Jones, they are the archons.
Without a doubt. They map perfectly. They are sentient programs that can commandeer any software hardwired to the mainframe.
They can become anyone inside the system.
Exactly. They were the beast-faced rulers of darkness. But instead of literal beast faces, they are dressed in these tailored green suits and dark sunglasses. They police the illusion.
Let me try to put this into a modern mechanical metaphor, especially for you listening to this to kind of ground it. Think of the demiurge as a rogue video game developer.
Okay, I like this.
He's a developer who somehow completely forgot that he is actually living inside a computer simulation himself.
Right. He lost the plot entirely.
Yeah. He thinks he wrote the original fundamental source code of all reality, but he didn't. He just built a really clunky, flawed mini-game.
A minigame full of bugs.
Exactly. And the Archons, the agents, they are just glitchy, highly aggressive antivirus software, violently deleting anyone who starts to question why the graphics look weird or why the physics engine keeps stuttering.
I love that analogy. It fits the Gnostic worldview perfectly. And our Gnostic Beginner's Guide source, it actually expands on how that quote-unquote antivirus software operates in our actual daily lives.
Oh, this is where it gets uncomfortably real.
Yeah. Because the Archons do not primarily use violence. They use distraction. They thrive on generating fear and desire.
Constant stimulation.
Yes. They craft these massive, all-encompassing systems of control. The pursuit of money, the absolute desperation for social status, the endless, deafening noise of media and politics.
Why, though? Just to be mean.
No, to keep humanity's attention directed entirely outward.
Wow. You keep their eyes glued to the screen so they never turn around and notice the projector.
Exactly. And Agent Smith's monologue, remember when he has Morpheus chained up to the chair in that interrogation room?
Oh, the smell speech, where he says he hates the smell of humans.
Right. That entire monologue is pure, unadulterated Gnostic philosophy. Smith reveals that the very first Matrix they built was designed to be a perfect human world, a utopia where no one suffered at all.
Right, everybody was happy, but the human crocs failed.
Whole fields of people just died.
Because the primitive cerebrum kept trying to wake up from the perfection.
And why is that? Because the divine spark within humans, the gnosis, it recognizes when something is hollow.
It knows it's a fake.
A perfectly smooth, painless simulation just felt profoundly wrong to the human soul. So Smith concludes that human beings actually define their reality through suffering and misery.
Which is so bleak.
It is. The Matrix had to be redesigned to reflect the late 20th century, the absolute peak of our civilization, as he calls it. The Archons realized they need the friction.
They need us to be stressed out.
They need the stress of paying taxes, the anxiety of a mind-numbing job, that constant low-level dread we all walk around with. That specific frequency of misery is exactly what keeps the human battery producing power. They literally need our suffering to sustain their flawed creation.
Okay, so this is an incredibly bleak picture. I mean, we are essentially spiritual batteries trapped in a simulated cage of suffering, and we're being policed by beast-faced antivirus software.
It sounds hopeless when you lay it all out like that.
It really does. So the fundamental question becomes, how do you escape? If you are trapped in a system that literally feeds on your ignorance, what is the currency of freedom? How do you buy your way out?
And this is where we bring the parable of the talents back in. But we bring it in through the lens of a brilliant second-century theologian and poet named Valentinus.
Valentinus, okay.
Okay.
So Valentinus took this basic Gnostic premise, this trap of the demiurge, and he created a highly structured framework for understanding human potential.
Right.
Our Gnostic talents outline source, it applies his framework directly to the biblical parable. Valentinus claimed that humanity is divided into three distinct classes.
3 levels of awareness.
Right, based entirely on how they respond to the divine spark or the gnosis that is offered to them.
And those 3 classes, for the listeners, are the hylic, the psychic, and the pneumatic.
Okay, I have to pause you here. I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Because reading these sources, I'm just going to say it, this sounds incredibly elitist.
It does. It sounds like a caste system.
Exactly. You're saying this ancient religion believed humanity was divided into a rigid spiritual caste system, that some people are just inherently better or more spiritual than others, because that sounds less like enlightenment and a whole lot more like a spiritual dictatorship.
I completely understand that reaction. And to be fair, it is a very common criticism of Gnosticism, both back in the 2nd century and today.
It's hard not to read it that way.
But if you look closer at the actual Valentinian texts, these are not genetic castes that you were born into and can never ever leave.
Okay.
They actually represent states of consciousness. They represent the choices a human soul makes when they are finally confronted with the truth.
So it's dynamic, it's fluid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the parable of the talents is the absolute perfect map for this, because in the story, every single servant is given a talent.
The master hands silver to all of them.
Right. The master doesn't withhold the silver from anyone. The difference, the entirely defining difference, is in what the servant chooses to do with it once they have it.
Okay, that makes much more sense. So it is about the response, not your origin. Let's break down these 3 responses then. The lowest tier, the people who are totally blissfully trapped in the simulation, they are the hylics.
Yes. The word comes from the Greek hyle, which means wood or matter.
Just dense physical stuff.
Right. These are individuals who are entirely 100% bound to the physical flesh. In a spiritual sense, they are sleepwalking through life. They are completely absorbed by the physical world, its appetites, and its completely made-up rules.
And then moving up, you have the middle tier, the psychics. And just to clarify for everyone, we do not mean people who can read minds or bend spoons.
No, no. The root here is psyche, meaning soul or mind. These are the strugglers.
The ones caught in the middle.
Yeah, they have an awareness of something higher. They possess a rational soul, and they really feel the tension between the dense material world and the higher spiritual realm.
They know something is off.
They do, but they are so easily choked by worldly thorns, by daily anxiety, and by material desires, they waver back and forth constantly.
And finally, you have the highest tier, the pneumatics.
From pneuma, meaning spirit or breath.
These are the spirit seeds. These are the individuals who possess the fully activated inner spark.
They are the ones who woke up.
Right. They have taken the talent, they have invested it, they've multiplied it, and they're destined to return to the pleroma, the true spiritual realm.
Now, to tie this all together, our sources point us to a very specific and honestly somewhat terrifying saying from the Gospel of Thomas.
The Gospel of Thomas is fascinating. It's basically just a list of quotes from Jesus, right? No narrative, just sayings.
Exactly. It's one of the most famous Nag Hammadi texts. And saying 41 reads, and I quote, "To one who has, more will be given. From one who lacks, even what he has will be taken."
Wow. I mean, in a traditional church setting, that sounds incredibly harsh. Almost brutal, like the rich getting richer and the poor just being openly robbed.
Right, it sounds like terrible economic policy. But in the esoteric Valentinian context, it is a statement about the strict physics of spiritual capital.
Explain that.
The talent is a spark of gnosis. Think of gnosis, think of it like a deeply encrypted zip file that just suddenly appears on your mental desktop one day.
Okay, I'm tracking.
That file contains the underlying source code of the entire universe. It contains the absolute knowledge of who you truly are outside the simulation and where you actually came from.
But, and here's the catch, you have to double-click it. You have to have the courage to extract the files.
Exactly. If you extract the file, if you actively invest the talent, the knowledge expands exponentially. Your consciousness grows. More will be given.
It compounds.
It does. But if you are too afraid, if you let it just sit there on your desktop untouched because you are scared of what it might do to your hard drive, eventually the archons are going to run a system sweep and they will delete it.
Oh, man. They just wipe it.
The material world will absolutely crush and absorb whatever potential you had. From one who lacks, even what he has will be taken.
This forces us to ask you, the listener, a very direct, personal question right now. The universal, or the true source, hands you a spark of awareness.
It happens to everyone at some point.
You feel it sometimes, do you not? That sudden, jarring realization that the daily grind is completely absurd. That the societal rules we all politely follow are completely made up out of thin air.
That feeling of alienation.
Yes, that is the talent being handed to you, right there in that moment of unease. So, what do you do with it?
Well, the Gnostic texts say you have three choices.
Let's look at the first choice. The hylic path, which directly corresponds to the servant in the parable who buries the talent. This is the ultimate blue pill.
In the biblical parable, this is the servant who is just paralyzed by fear. He is so terrified of his master, and he's so terrified of the complex rules of commerce, that he literally digs a hole in the dirt and hides the silver.
He just wants to maintain the status quo.
He opts for complete stasis. He totally refuses to participate in the spiritual economy.
In Valentinian terms, this is the hylic. If you map this onto, say, the parable of the sower, another biblical story, this is the seed that falls on the hard, packed dirt of a walking path.
Where it can't take root at all.
Right. The birds just swoop down and eat it immediately. There is zero response. No root takes hold whatsoever.
To truly understand the absolute tragedy of this state, our sources point us to an incredible ancient Syriac Gnostic poem called the Hymn of the Turtle.
I read this piece of the source material a dozen times getting ready for this. It is haunting. It is so beautiful and so sad.
It is a true masterpiece of esoteric literature. The poem tells this allegorical story of a young prince who lives in the East, and the East represents the pure spiritual realm of the pleroma.
His true home.
Right. His parents, the king and queen, they send him down to Egypt, which represents the heavy, corrupted material world, the realm of the demiurge.
Like he has a mission, right?
Yes, his mission is to retrieve a precious pearl that is being guarded by a terrible serpent. And the pearl, of course, represents the divine essence, the talent, the gnosis.
So he has a very clear, actionable mission. Go into the physical world, get the spark, and come back home. But he gets distracted.
Terribly distracted. He arrives in Egypt, and he does not want to stand out to the locals. He doesn't want them to know he's an alien. So he puts on their dirty, heavy garments.
He tries to blend in.
He integrates into their society completely. But the fatal mistake happens when they offer him food. The poem explicitly says he eats their local food, and because of the heavy, dense, earthly diet, he actually forgets his royal identity.
Oh, that is heartbreaking. He just forgets who he is.
He completely forgets that he is the son of kings. He forgets the pearl entirely. He forgets the mission, and he falls into a deep, endless sleep, willingly serving the local Egyptian king.
The parallels here to the hypothetical version of Neo, the Neo who chooses to take the blue pill, they are just screaming at us.
It is the exact same narrative.
When Morpheus offers Neo the 2 pills in that room, he is literally offering him the choice of what to do with the talent. Morpheus says, and this is almost a direct quote, "You take the blue pill and the story ends. You wake in your bed and you believe whatever you want to believe."
The food of Egypt in the poem, that heavy diet, is the illusory comfort of the Matrix.
Yes.
If Neo takes the blue pill, he is the prince eating the heavy food. He stays asleep. He takes his divine spark and he buries it deep under the dirt of the machine's code.
And the script for the movie, it goes out of its way to show us how horrific that buried blue pill state truly is.
We don't just hear about it, we physically see it.
We experience it with him. When Neo does take the red pill and he wakes up in the real world, the imagery the Wachowskis wrote into that screenplay is deeply unsettling.
The pod scene.
Yes. We see the inside of this clear tubular husk. The script literally describes a human fetus floating in this viscous, gelatinous fluid, and its soft, innocent skull is already growing around a metallic brain jack.
It is awful. It is a grotesque mechanical inversion of a mother's womb.
Exactly. It is the ultimate physical manifestation of the buried talent. Humanity has been reduced to nothing more than battery fodder, completely absorbed and consumed by the system.
You are not living a life.
No. You aren't living, you are just blindly powering the illusion for everyone else.
The Gospel of Philip, which is another Nag Hammadi text we have here, it speaks directly to the mechanics of this tragedy. It explicitly states that this world is unreal, and that the names that are employed here are deceptive.
Deceptive names, what does that mean?
The text says that the archons, the powers of this world, they use names like good and bad, rich and poor, to completely deceive humanity and bind them tightly to the illusion. The Hylics are entirely deceived by these completely fabricated labels.
Wow, think about the deceptive names we use right now in our own lives.
Oh, they are everywhere.
People actually believe that the title on their LinkedIn profile is who they fundamentally are.
Yes.
They believe their credit score is their actual worth as a human being. They believe the political labels they adopt are their total, absolute identity.
That is the food of Egypt. That is the dirt you bury the talent in. And the Matrix, the system, it relies on this exact, heavily manufactured amnesia to power itself.
Because if they wake up, the power goes out.
If the batteries remember they are human, if they remember they are the children of kings from the East, the entire system crashes instantly. So the demiurge practically forces you to obsess over your credit score. It's survival for the machine.
Okay, so the blue pill is the tragedy of never waking up at all, just dying in your sleep. But what happens if you do wake up?
This is where it gets complicated.
Right? What if the prince remembers he's a prince, he receives the talent, he unzips the file, but then he lets the sheer terror of the real world completely overwhelm him?
This brings us to the second path.
The psychic path. The squandered talent.
This is perhaps the most nuanced, the most psychologically complex, and honestly the most tragic path of all three.
Enter Cypher. Cypher is the absolute embodiment of a second servant in our specific Gnostic mapping today.
It is important to clarify something for any biblical scholars who might be listening right now.
Oh, right. The biblical difference.
Yeah. In the actual Gospels, Matthew, the second servant receives 2 talents and successfully doubles them to 4.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. But in our Valentinian mapping that we're using from the sources, this middle position represents the psychic class.
The soul struggler. The one who wavers constantly.
Yes. The seed is planted. It actually sprouts. They genuinely receive the gnosis. But the gospel says it grows among thorns.
The weeds choke it out.
Right. The Valentinian psychic gets halfway there. They recognize the spiritual reality. They clearly see that the Matrix is a prison, but the gravitational pull of the rational soul, the fear of actual physical hardship, and the sheer weight of material desires, they ultimately win out over the spiritual ascent.
Which means Cypher took the red pill. That's the tragic part.
He was awake.
He was fully unplugged. He received the talent directly from Morpheus. But he spends years looking around that cold, cramped, miserable hovercraft. He eats that tasteless, single-celled protein goop out of a metal bowl every day.
He feels the damp cold of the real world.
Right. And he just decides that the quote-unquote desert of the real is just too harsh to bear.
Which leads directly to the infamous betrayal scene. Cypher strikes a deal with the Archon. He sits down with Agent Smith.
Let's really look at the details of this scene from the screenplay because it is a masterclass in philosophical storytelling.
The imagery is so deliberate.
It's perfect. He goes to this fancy, completely simulated restaurant. The chamber music is playing softly in the background. The lighting is this warm golden hue. Cypher is literally sawing through a thick, gorgeous, perfectly charred steak. He chews it loudly, and his eyes are literally rolling up in his head with pure, unadulterated sensory pleasure.
And he says the quiet part out loud. He articulates the core philosophy of the psychic failure.
He looks right at Smith and says, I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
It is the ultimate conscious rejection of gnosis.
He's choosing to go back to sleep.
Exactly. He isn't ignorant, like the Hylic. The Hylic never do any better. Cypher knows the truth, and he is voluntarily, desperately asking for the amnesia of the Hymn of the Pearl.
He wants the Egyptian food back.
He begs Agent Smith to wipe his memory entirely. He tells him he doesn't want to remember nothing. He wants to be put back into the pod, but he demands to be rich, to be someone important. Like an actor, he says.
Which is such a brilliant pink dialogue. Like an actor. Because an actor plays a role that isn't real on a stage that isn't real. Cypher is knowingly asking to be put back into a fake play just because the real world demands too much responsibility.
But I want to pose a very uncomfortable question here, based on Carl Jung's framework from our sources.
Okay, lay on me.
Is Cypher just a cartoonish, cowardly villain? Or, if we are completely brutally honest with ourselves, is Cypher actually the most relatable character in the entire movie?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think he absolutely is. And that is genuinely terrifying to admit.
Because he represents that agonizing middle ground we all live in every day. The anxiety of knowing the world is broken.
We all feel it.
We read the news. We see the absolute corruption in systems. We know that these massive corporations are harvesting our data and our attention. We know the system is illusory and deeply damaging.
But we so deeply wish we could just go back to sleep.
Because carrying the truth of how broken it all is, it's exhausting. It is so much easier to just eat the steak, buy the new phone, and watch a sitcom.
But the Gnostic sources warn us about the fatal flaw in Cypher's plan here.
He goes to the wrong people for help.
Right. He goes to the Archons for salvation. He strikes a deal with the agents.
And the Archons cannot offer true redemption. It's not in their programming. They do not have the power to save a human soul. They only have the power to build you a slightly more comfortable cage.
A cage with better lighting?
Right. Cypher functions as the servant who tries to invest the talent. But when the spiritual market gets volatile, he just panics. He sells all his shares at a massive catastrophic loss just to stop the anxiety of holding them.
And what happens to him? He loses everything. He betrays his entire crew, he murders several of his friends in cold blood, and before he can even be plugged back into his comfortable simulation, he is killed by Tank.
A laser bolt right to the chest.
His physical body dies, his connection to the Matrix is severed forever, and his talent is permanently taken away. Game over.
The Gospel of Philip explicitly, clearly warns about this exact scenario. It says that if you actually receive the mystery of the truth and that you willfully sell yourself back into slavery to the material world, you lose your freedom entirely. You are actually worse off than if you had never known the truth at all.
Which leaves only the third option on the table. The servant who takes the immense risk, defies the Archons entirely, embraces the cold desert of the real, and somehow doubles the talent.
This is the path of the one.
The pneumatic path. Neo's ascent.
In Valentinian terms, this is the pneumatic. The good earth, it bears incredible, miraculous fruit.
Now, what is really crucial to understand about the Valentinian framework here, and this is something that firmly sets it apart from a lot of orthodox afterlife theology, is that this union with the divine, this victory, it does not happen after you die.
Right, you don't wait for heaven.
It isn't a promise of, getting a nice harp and sitting on a cloud in 50 years. It is an immediate, radical transformation of reality right here and right now.
Neo taking the red pill is the initial investment of the talent. And Morpheus, he acts as a very honest, transparent broker in this transaction.
He doesn't sugarcoat it.
Not at all. He holds out his hands and says, remember that all I am offering is the truth. Nothing more. He isn't offering happiness. He isn't offering wealth or a juicy steak. Just the raw, unvarnished, terrifying truth.
But Neo's journey proves that receiving Gnosis isn't just a one-time event. You don't just swallow a pill on a Tuesday and suddenly completely understand the universe.
It is a grueling, painful process of unlearning.
The human mind is so deeply conditioned by the demiurge's physics that even when you consciously know you are in a simulation, you still instinctively follow its rules.
You still think gravity applies to you.
Exactly. And my absolute favorite scene that illustrates this process, the unlearning process, is the waiting room at the Oracle's apartment.
Oh, the potentials.
Yes. Neo is sitting there with the potentials. These are other individuals, mostly young children, who have activated the spark. And he watches this skinny boy dressed in these monk-like robes, and the boy is just holding a spoon.
And the spoon is bending.
The spoon is swaying and bending like a blade of grass blowing in the wind. So Neo, he picks up his own spoon. He stares at it intensely. He tries to use his willpower, his raw mental force, to bend the metal.
And nothing happens.
Nothing. The spoon stays completely rigid.
Because Neo is still actively applying the rules of the material world to the illusion. He is treating the spoon as a physical object that exists separate from himself. He is trying to force matter to obey his mind.
Exactly. And the boy looks up at him and drops the heaviest, purest Gnostic truth bomb in cinema history.
It really is.
He says, do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth. Neo, looking totally confused, asks, what truth? And the boy says, there is no spoon. Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends. It is only yourself.
This is the absolute essence of esoteric awakening. The material laws, gravity, density, the Archon's code, they are complete and utter illusions. You cannot bend matter by force because matter does not actually exist.
It's just a projection.
The boundary between yourself and the universe is a lie constructed by the demiurge to keep you small. The spoon is just code. You are just code. When you deeply realize there is no separation, the environment just bends to your will naturally.
And this is where Carl Jung's work in Answer to Job becomes essentially the Rosetta Stone for really understanding Neo's character.
It's the psychological key.
Right, because how does a 20th century Swiss psychoanalyst fit into Keanu Reeves bending a spoon in a cyberpunk movie?
Well, Jung offers a profound psychological translation of these ancient cosmic concepts. Jung spent a huge amount of time analyzing religious texts, and in Answer to Job, he argues that the figure of Christ in theology is actually a psychological symbol.
A symbol for what?
Christ represents what Jung calls the self, with a capital S.
Okay, let's break that down for the listener, because Jungian terminology can get really dense really fast. We all have an ego, right? The conscious I that wakes up, goes to work, and pays the bills.
Yes, but the ego is just a very small, fragile fragment of your total psyche. Below the ego is the vast, oceanic, dark unconscious, the shadow, the archetypes, the repressed desires, everything you hide.
So what is the self?
Jung believed that true psychological ascendance, what he called individuation, happens when the conscious ego and the vast unconscious are perfectly united and integrated into one whole. That state of total wholeness, that is the self.
And Jung notes that in the biblical book of Revelation, the crazy apocalyptic visions that John experienced, they weren't necessarily external prophecies about the literal end of the physical world.
No, they were internal.
John was experiencing the Christ image, the archetype of the unified self, activating and being born within his own unconscious mind. It was an internal apocalypse of his old fragmented ego.
Exactly. And Neo completely embodies this exact archetype within the Matrix. His status as the One is not some magical genetic mutation. It isn't a superhero serum he drank. It is the ultimate human potential, the fully realized, integrated self activating within the simulation.
So Neo isn't a superhero because he went to a digital gym and got magic muscles. He doesn't have super strength.
No, he's just a guy.
He is a superhero because he is the only person who truly fully realizes he is standing inside a computer program. His superpower is pure, unadulterated awareness. His consciousness literally expands from a localized ego to fill the entire container of the Matrix.
He doubles the talent to its absolute mathematical limit. He achieves gnosis.
But, and this is a massive but in the Gnostic tradition, which breaks away from a lot of modern, bootstrap self-help philosophy.
Yeah.
Neo does not figure this out alone.
He can't.
A human being cannot just grit their teeth and will their way to gnosis in a vacuum. The esoteric framework demands a very specific catalyst. It demands a feminine principle of wisdom to actually trigger this awakening.
Which brings us to a fascinating divergence in theological history. If you look at Orthodox traditions, the divine is almost exclusively presented as male.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost, patriarchs, kings, lords.
Right. But the Nag Hammadi texts, they blow that patriarchal paradigm wide open.
They introduce us to the divine feminine.
Specifically, the figure of Sophia, which is the Greek word for wisdom. In texts like The Reality of the Rulers and Allogenes, Sophia is a central, highly active force.
What's her role?
Well, in the Gnostic creation myth, it was actually Sophia who originally accidentally caused the cosmic anomaly that led to the birth of the ignorant demiurge in the first place.
So she's kind of responsible for the mess.
She is. But because she is the mother of the anomaly, she is also the one actively, constantly working to fix it.
She doesn't just abandon humanity to the blind god and walk away.
Never. The texts describe her pointing her finger to introduce tiny drops of pure light into the dark, chaotic matter of the demiurge's realm. She breathes fiery angels to bind Yaldabaoth. Sophia is the guiding, nurturing, rebellious force trying to lead humanity back to the pleroma.
And Jung has a deeply psychological perspective on Sophia as well, right? He ties her into his framework.
He does. Jung analyzes Sophia as God's self-reflection. If God is pure, unmanifested consciousness, Sophia is the mirror that actually allows God to know himself.
The mirror of wisdom.
Yes. Jung calls her the mother of fair love, and he notes she is sometimes visually represented as the heavenly city of Jerusalem.
Or if we map it directly to the Wachowskis' universe, the last human city of Zion.
Precisely. She is the archetype of wisdom that willingly descends into the messy, painful, bloody density of the material world just to rescue the lost fragments of light.
So in the Matrix, we actually have two massive Sophia figures operating to help Neo double his talent.
Two very distinct manifestations.
The first is, quite literally, the Oracle. Think about Neo's expectations when Morpheus says he's going to see her. He's told he's going to meet this omniscient, mythical guide. He's probably expecting a glowing, ethereal goddess sitting on a snowy mountain peak.
And what does he get?
Instead, he walks into a cramped, chaotic, slightly smoky apartment kitchen that just smells like baked goods.
Which perfectly masks her cosmic significance. The Archons, the agents, they wouldn't look twice at an older woman baking cookies in a kitchen. She hides in the mundane.
It's perfect camouflage. And above her kitchen door is a wooden plaque with a Latin phrase, Temet nos, know thyself.
The ultimate command.
This is the ultimate Gnostic command. She plays the role of the fallen, disguised guide perfectly. She offers him a cookie, this comforting, purely earthly guise, but she casually drops profound cosmic truths while he's chewing it.
She examines him, right?
Yeah. She looks in his eyes, she checks his mouth like a doctor checking a patient, and she tells him he has the gift, but that he's waiting for his next life.
To Neo's fragile ego, that sounds like terrible news. It sounds like she's saying, you aren't the one. Sorry. Better luck next time.
He looks so disappointed.
But she is actually acting as the pure voice of prophecy. She is outlining his necessary impending death and resurrection. In Jungian terms, the fragile ego must die so that the integrated self can actually be born.
But the Oracle is just the guide. She's just pointing the way. The ultimate manifestation of the active Sophia principle, the divine spark injected directly into the muddy trenches of the war zone, is Trinity.
Trinity is the active agent of salvation.
Trinity represents the divine wisdom that has fallen into the Matrix alongside Neo, actively fighting with him. And if you look closely at the script, she's the one who literally brings Neo back from the dead.
This creates one of the most powerful direct connections to the Hymn of the Pearl.
Yes. Okay, let's set the scene, because this is the climax of everything we have been building toward in this deep dive.
It's the peak of the movie.
Neo has finally faced Agent Smith, but he's not fully ready. He runs. He runs through the city. He gets to the hotel hallway. He opens the door to room 303, and Smith is standing right there waiting for him.
And Smith doesn't hesitate.
Smith unloads his gun point blank into Neo's chest. 3 holes. Neo slides down the wall. He is dead. Back on the hovercraft in the real world, his physical body flatlines. The monitors show a flat red line and scream.
In the orthodox, purely physical sense, it is over. The Hylic body has perished. The Archons have won the game.
But in the hovercraft, Trinity flat out refuses to accept the material rules. She leans over Neo's lifeless, bloody physical body. The Sentinels, the machines, are literally cutting through the metal hull of the ship right above them with lasers.
Sparks are raining down.
And amidst all that deafening chaos, she leans in and whispers to him. She says, "The Oracle told me that I would fall in love, and that man, the man who I loved, would be the one. So you see, you can't be dead. You can't be. Because I love you."
The power of that moment.
He kisses him, and she says, "Now get up."
Now, think back to the prince in Egypt from the Hymn of the Pearl. He is trapped in this deep, unyielding sleep of amnesia, fully poisoned by the food of the demiurge. How does he finally wake up?
How does he break the spell?
His parents, the king and queen of the East, they send him a letter. The ancient text says the letter is carried by an eagle, and the letter literally speaks to him. It reminds him of his royal bloodline. It tells him to wake up and remember the pearl he was sent for.
Trinity's love, her whisper in his ear, and her kiss, they act exactly as that letter from the eagle. It is the Sophia principle violently piercing the veil of death and illusion.
Bypassing the code entirely.
The love of the divine feminine bypasses the archonic code like it isn't even there. It wakes the sleeping prince. She fully restores his true identity.
And when Neo's eyes snap open in that digital hallway, everything has changed. His consciousness has permanently shifted from psychic to pneumatic.
With his identity fully restored, the talent not just doubled, but basically maximized to infinity, Neo must now face the final barrier, the powers of the material world. Which brings us to the actual mechanics of defeating the Archons.
Right, because he still has to deal with Smith. And for this, we must look at the Gospel of Mary, specifically the text attributed to Mary of Magdala.
This text is incredible.
It is. This scroll features a stunning, detailed sequence detailing the soul's ascent after death. As the soul rises toward the pleroma, it must pass through these planetary spheres. And these spheres are guarded by demonic entities known as the powers of wrath.
I read this sequence in the sources, and honestly, it plays out exactly like a boss rush in a video game. You have to defeat one level, beat the boss just to get to the next.
It truly is a cosmic gauntlet. The text lists 7 specific forms of wrath, including darkness, desire, ignorance, and the zeal for death.
Cheerful group.
Right. And as the enlightened soul rises, these powers step in its path. They try to intimidate it, they aggressively interrogate it, and they try to legally bind it back to the material realm using its past sins.
They try to guilt trip the soul.
Exactly. That specific power of ignorance stops the soul and falsely accuses it, saying, "Where are you going? You are bound by wickedness. You are bound. Do not judge."
So ignorance is trying to use the soul's own guilt and its fear of divine judgment as a weapon against it. So how does the soul respond? Does it fight back? Does it pull out a spiritual plasma rifle and shoot ignorance?
No, not at all. The soul completely turns the tables. The soul doesn't fight. It simply states the objective truth.
What does it say?
The soul replies, "Why do you judge me, since I have not passed judgment? I have been bound, but I have not bound anything." And then the soul delivers the absolute killing blow of pure gnosis. It says, "I have recognized that the universe is to be dissolved, both the things of earth and those of heaven."
Wow. I have recognized that the universe is to be dissolved. That genuinely gives me chills, because we can overlay that exact ancient sentiment directly onto Neo's final confrontation in the hallway.
It maps perfectly to his awakening.
Let's really look at the mechanics of that final fight. Neo resurrects. He stands up. The agents, the ultimate Archons, they turn around absolutely terrified because their code says he should be 100% dead.
Right, it breaks their reality.
Agent Smith is enraged. He unloads his heavy Desert Eagle point blank at Neo. But Neo doesn't dodge the bullets this time. He doesn't move fast. He just calmly raises his hand and says no.
And the bullets just stop.
They stop in midair. They just drop to the floor like useless little pebbles. Now, Neo doesn't run up and punch Smith harder than he did before. He doesn't use the violent weapons of the Matrix. As the script and our source documents point out, Neo experiences what is called a luminous vision.
This touches on a deeply Gnostic theme that runs through all the texts, the concept of physical blindness versus true spiritual sight.
Seeing what is actually there.
Throughout the Gnostic myths, and honestly throughout the Matrix series as a whole, physical sight is seen as a massive limitation. It only shows you the demiurge's shadows on the cave wall. When physical eyes fail, or when you finally learn to look past them, the nomadic gains luminous vision. They see the underlying spiritual reality.
And we see this happen. Neo looks down the hallway, and the walls, the carpet, the agents themselves, they all melt away. The physical illusion drops completely. He sees pure, cascading green code.
He sees spirit over flesh.
He realizes the agents aren't terrifying monsters who can hurt him. They're just localized math.
And how does he finally defeat Smith? He doesn't punch him into submission. He doesn't destroy him externally. He dives into him.
He physically jumps inside Agent Smith's digital avatar, taking over his code from the inside, and literally bursts him from the inside out, shattering the Archon into pure, blinding light.
In doing so, he fulfills the specific prophecy given in the reality of the rulers, which states that the children of light will eventually trample on death, which comes from the authorities.
He literally tramples on the authority of death.
It is exactly like the Gospel of Mary says. The soul does not fight the powers with their own weapons of violence and domination. It simply realizes the powers have no legitimate domination to begin with.
I have recognized that the universe is to be dissolved.
Yes.
Neo just looks at the two remaining agents. He casually flexes the code of the Matrix, warping the walls around him like rubber, and the Archons turn and flee in sheer, absolute terror because the illusion has completely lost its grip on him.
The Archons are rendered entirely powerless against pure Gnosis.
So Neo flexes, he makes a phone call from a payphone, puts on his sunglasses, and literally flies off into the sky to a Rage Against the Machine song.
It is an amazing, visceral, cinematic triumph.
It is the coolest ending ever. But, and here's where we bring it all home, we do not live in a movie.
Unfortunately, no.
We can't just fly away into the clouds when we get stressed out. We still have to wake up tomorrow, sit in terrible traffic, and pay our rent. Which brings us to the most vital part of this deep dive. Living with Gnosis. Why all this ancient theology and sci-fi movie trivia actually matters to you, the listener, right now, today.
Because if we leave this as just a really cool movie analysis, we have completely failed. We've missed the entire point of what the Gnostic texts were trying to teach.
It's a manual for living.
It is. We need to bring this back to the listener's daily reality using the Gnostic Beginner's Guide from our sources.
The guide makes a really critical, highly practical point. Gnosis is not about escaping the world physically. You can't just unplug, abandon your family, and go live in a dark cave in the desert. It is about radically transforming how you live within the world.
We have a beautiful, really grounding quote from the Gospel of Philip to anchor this concept. It says, quote, "Truth did not come into the world naked, but it came in the types and the images."
The types and the images.
The physical world around us, the relationships we have, the jobs we do to survive, these are the types and images. We cannot avoid them. We have to learn to navigate them with awareness.
And the world is full of types and images. And it is absolutely swarming with modern-day archons.
Oh, very much so. Let's be very clear about what an archon actually is today. Today's archons are not guys in green suits and sunglasses chasing you down an alley with a gun.
They are much more subtle than that.
They are the social media algorithms, specifically, scientifically designed to keep your brain dripping with dopamine so you keep scrolling endlessly.
Just feeding the machine.
They are the endless 24-hour rage-bait news cycles that convince you your neighbor is your mortal enemy over minor political differences. They are the societal pressures and relentless marketing campaigns that constantly whisper in your ear, you are separate, you are powerless, you are ugly, you are incomplete without buying this product.
They are the massive, invisible systems demanding that you bury your talent in the dirt in exchange for just a tiny, fleeting sliver of comfort. So I want to ask you, the listener, right now, how often do you feel that splinter in your mind that Morpheus talked about? That nagging, persistent 3 a.m. feeling that something is fundamentally wrong with the way we are all living?
It keeps you awake.
That feeling that you are meant for something infinitely more profound than just waking up, working a job you hate, consuming plastic garbage, and sleeping.
I want to validate that feeling for you right now. That unease is not a psychological malfunction. You are not broken because you feel anxious about society.
You're awake.
That unease is your divine spark. That is the talent you were given, literally vibrating against the heavy constraints of the demiurge's cage.
Taking the red pill, consciously choosing the nomadic path, it means living with Gnosis. The beginner's guide says it means engaging with your work, your family, your entire life, like an actor on a stage who fundamentally knows it is a play.
Yeah, the props are fake.
Right. You don't take the drama so seriously that it destroys your inner peace. But you still play your part beautifully because you genuinely love the other actors on the stage. You consciously choose light, compassion, and unity in every single moment, and by doing so, you actively starve the illusion of the fear it so desperately needs to survive.
You bend the spoon, not by angrily forcing the external world to change to your whims, but by realizing the external world is just a reflection of your own inner state of consciousness. If you find true peace within, the matrix completely loses its teeth.
We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today.
A huge journey.
From the ancient buried sands of Egypt and the Nag Hammadi scrolls, through Carl Jung's incredibly complex psychoanalysis of the human mind, all the way to a 1999 sci-fi action masterpiece.
We really connected the dots.
We have mapped the human soul's trajectory, from being totally asleep and entirely consumed by matter, the Hylic, the blue pill, to being awake but deeply fearful, struggling, and ultimately failing, the psychic, the cipher.
The tragic myth.
To being fully awake, realized, and united with the divine, the pneumatic, the one.
It is a map of human consciousness that has somehow survived for 2 millennia. They literally tried to burn these texts. They tried to outlaw the ideas and kill the people who held them. But the truth of it just keeps bubbling up, even in massive Hollywood blockbusters, because it deeply resonates with the oldest part of the human psyche.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over, drawn from the deepest implications of these ancient sources.
Okay.
In the ultimate Gnostic view, if you zoom all the way out, past the daily struggles, the demiurge and the matrix are not fundamentally evil.
That is the ultimate hidden secret of the texts. They are not evil. They are just highly efficient training grounds.
Think about the massive implications of that. The friction of your daily life, the stress of your commute, the suffering you endure, the profound density and frustration of this physical illusion. These are not punishments from an angry God.
The resistance.
They are the exact, specific weights you need to lift to build your spiritual muscles. If the illusion did not exist, if the game did not have any resistance, you could never double your talent. You'd have absolutely nothing to invest it against. A muscle cannot grow without gravity.
The obstacle isn't blocking the path. The obstacle is the path.
So tomorrow, when you wake up and face the endless distractions, the pinging notifications, the archonic anxieties of modern life, do not ask how to escape them. Do not look for an exit door that isn't there. Look at the solid wooden table in front of you, knock on it, hear the thud, acknowledge the illusion, and ask yourself, is this the moment I let the fear win and bury my talent in the dirt? Or is this the moment I realize there is no spoon?
That is the existential wager we all have to answer every single day of our lives.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope you leave today with your spark just a little bit brighter.